afternoon, everyone. It is an honor and privilege to welcome Mr. Charles Allen for a session on an introduction to positive peace and the positive peace systems approach to social change. Mr. Charles Allen is the Director of Partnerships with the Institute for Economics and Peace, Sydney, Australia. You're welcome, Mr. Allen, and as you know, you have up to 2 hours for this session, and you're welcome to conduct it however you like to. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Bazad, and good evening, everybody, or good morning, depending on your time zone. It's evening here in Australia. I'm coming to you from Sydney, Australia, and as Bazad introduced me, I'm the Director of Partnerships with the Institute for Economics and Peace. So tonight, what I'd like to achieve is, some of you may be aware of the work of the Institute for Economics and Peace. I'm sure that many of you are not, and that's fine. So I'll introduce you to the Institute for Economics and Peace, give you an overview of the type of research that we do. But what I want to dive into tonight is to talk about the concept of positive peace, systems thinking, and the application of positive peace for social change. And from what I understand about your program and your backgrounds, that is probably your area of interest. So to get to that point, I'd like to talk a little bit about our research up front and get to that point of application of positive peace, the positive peace framework. So I also encourage questions throughout, and encourage this to be as discussional as you would like it to be. And whether I'll hold up at certain points and ask for questions, but also if you want to drop questions into the chat as we go along, then that would be really good. We can stop and take questions at any point. So you're not just listening to my voice, and we bring some other voices and other viewpoints into the discussion tonight. So I'll start with sharing a screen. All right. So I'll just talk a little bit about our organisation first of all, the Institute for Economics and Peace, and we're independent, not-for-profit think tank, and really what our business is, we're in the business of measuring peace. Not only do we measure peace, but we also put a cost on the economic impact of violence and the reverse of that, the economic benefit of peace. So as the name suggests, our researchers, a varied group of people, economists, actuaries, data scientists, mathematicians, a range of people with a range of diverse skills, and really their expertise is identifying quantitative data sets, drawing them together, aggregating them, and unpicking the stories that those data sets tell. So as I said, we're in the business of measuring peace and putting a cost on its economic benefit. You might ask, well, why do you do that? It's pretty simple. Before the Institute for Economics and Peace existed, nobody was doing this work, and our founder formed the view, well, if there's that old adage, you can't manage what you don't measure. So if peace is not being measured, if the economic benefit of peace is not being costed, how can people who are working in social reform or social change or peace building create a difference? So that was why this work started, and that we've been doing this work for some 15 years now. The Institute for Economics and Peace is, as I said, we're an international organisation. We're headquartered here in Sydney, Australia, but we'll also have offices in New York, in Mexico City, in Harare, in Zimbabwe, in The Hague, and Brussels. Our work is used fairly extensively. Certainly a wide range of multilateral organisations pick up our work: OECD, Commonwealth Secretariat, World Bank, United Nations. So this morning, one of my meetings was with the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism, and they're looking to draw our research into their program development for interventions in the Sahel region of Africa, just to give you a sense of the type of organisations that we work with. But it's not just multilaterals. We work with nation states, and we work through to community organisations. In fact, most of the work that I do, and I should say I'm not a researcher, I'm a practitioner. Most of my work is very much community facing. Our work is included across a range of university courses. Our work gets hundreds of thousands of downloads per annum, and you can see here the type of reach we're getting. When I say reach, it's often said that the Institute for Economics and Peace is not a bad research organisation, but we're also a pretty good communications organisation. And we actually make no apologies for that, because we position our research as practitioner-focused research, and unless it's accessible, obtainable, readable and practical, it's really not going to achieve our aims. So we make no apologies about working hard at getting our research out there. And you can see some of the large numbers there from our media reach, our social media reach, number of visits to our website, and the type of reach we get with our research products. Okay, I probably would like to ask, I might even stop sharing there for a bit. I'd just probably like you to do a quick reflection, and what I'd like you to do, and I know you come from varied backgrounds and varied disciplines, and I'm sure there's some peace builders in amongst you, but I'd like you to quickly reflect. Just take a second to think. What is it when you hear the word peace? What is it that springs into your mind? What is the definition, if you like, the really short, sharp definition that springs into your mind when you hear that word peace? And just spend a second to think about that, and maybe it'd be really nice if you can throw your ideas up into the chat. I'm not looking for a complex definition. What I really want is, what is that thing that pops into your mind when you hear that word peace? I'm happy to start, because the thing that pops into my mind when I hear that word peace is absence of war. That always is the first place that I land when I hear that word. So I'd really be interested to see you, see your reflections. If you can share in the chat, what are the things that pops into your mind when you hear that word peace?
Yeah, so peace, I understand, is a sort of a harmony between inter-beings or intra-beings, even within. So, like if our thoughts are in harmony, then it will be a peace.
Yep. Harmony, and I think I heard that you saw that it was very much an internal emotional or internal feeling or internal way of being. I think that's how you're expressing it. Great, thank you. There's some reflections popping up in the chat box there. Harmonious relationships, non-violence, sense of internal and external agreement, tolerance and cooperation. There's no right or wrong answer here. The point of this exercise is to really demonstrate how complex peace actually is. And I study peace and conflict prevention. That's certainly one of my academic pursuits, and there's plenty of penned definitions of peace. But I would suggest if you walked into a room of how many people we've got here? 26 people. Walked into a room of 26 people and said, hey, well, when you hear that word peace, what is it you think of? You're probably going to get 26 different reflections, 26 different answers. And it depends on a whole range of things. And it's really interesting. I'm aware that many of you in the room tonight are from India, and certainly that concept of non-violence, is deeply rooted in Indian culture. And some of that is coming through in some of the reflections that are popping into the chat box. So I'm seeing the idea of not fighting, movement of feelings and expression, peace in a way of life, and starting from the person's heart. So very much that internalized peace or inner peace, which is very deep rooted in Gandhianism, I guess, and also in Buddhism for that matter. Mutual respect, coexistence, motive of bringing progressive aspect. A balance inside and outside, harmony and coexistence. Mutual understanding, acceptance of each other. Diffusing disagreements. That's very relevant for a group who are focusing on dialogue. All right, that's great. And as I said, you can come into a room and get a very wide range of views when you ask for that definition of peace. So thank you very much for sharing your ideas. Now, I want to return to those shortly. So, as I said, that my organisation, the Institute for Economics and Peace, we're in the business of measuring peace. So if you're going to measure something, you really need to start with the definition. So we use a couple of definitions. First of all, we use a negative definition of peace, being the absence of violence or the absence of fear of violence. Now, when I gave my reflection, I said that the first place I land is, oh, well, peace, that's about an absence of war. Clearly, you can have an absence of war, but still not be living peacefully. South Sudan springs to mind. South Sudan currently has an existing peace agreement, but I would suggest that South Sudan is from a peaceful organisation. Peaceful country. So that's that negative definition of peace, and I'm going to talk about how we use that to create indices. And where I want to get to tonight is focusing on positive peace. And the definition that we use for positive peace is the attitudes, institutions and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. That idea of positive peace was first coined by a peace researcher, Johan Galtung. And if there's some peace academics amongst you, you may be aware of Galtung's work. So we really have leveraged and used Galtung's definition of peace and turned that into an indice, and into a framework which I'll share with you as we progress through the evening. Okay, what I might do, just to break this up a little bit, is share a video with you, which gives you will give you a bit more understanding of the Institute for Economics and Peace, why we exist. It's only a short clip. It's about three minutes, and this video clip was shot about 3 years ago at our Positive Peace conference that we hold annually. Well, we held annually prior to COVID at Stanford University. So I'll share this with you.
What the Institute for Economics and Peace has done with the Global Peace Index is taken information that was otherwise invisible and made it visible. I like to think of it in terms of, we're all familiar with Instagram, right? And we take a photo, and then we can apply all these filters on the photo. Different details of the photo all of a sudden become more prominent. In the world, peace is by and large invisible. Imagine that we could put a filter on it, and as we went about our business, all of a sudden we could see the peace in the world. Everywhere, right? Because all of a sudden it was brought to our attention because we had this filter that brought it up. The key thing is that for us to be aware of it and to notice it, and then we can measure it. And to have a baseline data gives us a way to identify what's actually going on in the world because we have hard data. And then we can look at that and say, well, if we put an intervention in, and say for instance in corruption, does that make things better or worse? And we could start to experiment. We could take an experimental mindset toward peace.
Peace is actually a fairly complex subject because in a way it's a starting condition for all of the other good things that have to happen in life. So peace also has to have content. It needs a space in which human beings can flourish, and that requires things more than the absence of violence. I think that's really a key issue.
So the IEP has been a very important institution because in just a few years has been able to zero in on the idea that it is possible to measure and in some ways provide a quantifiable ranking of how countries are progressing in their path towards more peaceful societies.
What I find that's beautiful about the framework is that it's so adaptable. Anyone can adapt it to their own needs, their own work, but still specific enough that they can be very deliberate about the work that they do to try to build peace.
I think what is useful to me, having been a scientist and a business person, is to see somebody pull together data and turn it into actionable information to help reduce violence in a step-by-step uniform manner that we can all apply. And because IEP has invested in the measurements, we can see if we've made progress and we can help sustain that progress.
I think the Peace Index really helps us to understand the complexity of the phenomenon of peace. The fact that it is not one-dimensional but really multidimensional. It challenges us to think, in deeper ways about what it means to really have a true peace.
In the particular case of Mexico, the Mexico Peace Index has also been a very important public debate because it has forced local officials to think about what they're doing to improve their ranking in this index. When the index comes out, governors pay attention, and citizens also want their governments to be more accountable, and this metric puts us in a kind of common language that we can speak about whether peace is progressing or not.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that glitch. I'm not sure what happened there. So I'll just go back to a slideshow. And as I said, if there's questions that pop up along the way, either interject or just drop something in the chat, whatever your preference is. Sorry, I'll just take off the optimized screen. Okay. So we touched on those definitions of peace that the Institute for Economics and Peace relies upon. That negative definition being the absence of violence or absence of fear of violence, and the positive definition being the attitudes, institutions, structures that sustain create and sustain peaceful societies. So first of all, I want to touch on the Global Peace Index. And the Global Peace Index is the most known piece of research by the Institute of Economics and Peace, and certainly the most used piece of research. It has become a global measure for peace. We've been doing this piece of work for some 15 years now, so it also gives us that longitudinal trends over a 15 year period. So what the Global Peace Index does, it doesn't look at a country and say that the country is peaceful or not peaceful, but it ranks countries from 163 countries, from the most peaceful to the least peaceful. So clearly 163 countries isn't all the countries on the globe, but it's a great many of them. There are some countries excluded because of size or lack of population, which skews the index. But the countries, the 163 countries that we measure, covers off on 99.7% of the global population. As I mentioned before, what our researchers do, and their skill is identifying appropriate data sets, aggregating those data sets and unpicking the story that data is telling. And for the Global Peace Index, we aggregate 23 different data sets. Certainly it's put together by the Institute for Economics and Peace, but it is overseen by an international panel of experts. Okay. So I mentioned that there are 23 indicators that form the Global Peace Index, and those 23 indicators capture 3 different domains. So the first domain being measures of ongoing domestic and international conflict. So that's really about how nicely you play in the global sandpit, as well as how nicely you play in your own sandpit, if you like. It captures 10 measures of societal safety and security. So it really is those internal indicators, crime rates, homicide, serious crime, impact of terrorism, incarceration rates, number of police per standardised per 100,000 people, IDPs, internally displaced people. And the third domain, as you would expect, is 7 measures of militarisation. So it picks up indicators such as MILEX or military expenditure, access to weapons, heavy weapons and nuclear weapons, and a number of armed service personnel. So there's 7 indicators for the militarisation domain. So they're the 23 indicators that are aggregated. So what are the key findings? So this is when we take those global rankings and put it into a map of the globe. This is what the globe looks like. The darker colours, so the redder colours, are the least peaceful countries, through to the greener colours being the most peaceful countries. So that sort of gives you a sense of what the globe looks like based on the Global Peace Index. Okay, so highlights for 2021, and I should say that the 2021 report was released in June of this year, and the cut through for the data set is the end of March. And I specifically say that because clearly COVID is a significant global shock, and that is undoubtedly having an impact on peace. So I just sort of positioned the cutoff for the data point so you can sort of position it with that sort of COVID thinking in mind. So for 2021, so 2020 into 2021, peace declined by 0.07%. Clearly that's a fairly small number, and you might think, well, is that statistically significant? I can assure you that it is when you're looking at a global average for peacefulness. And it's also the 9th deterioration in peacefulness we've had in the past 13 years. So in 2021, 87 countries became more peaceful, 73 countries deteriorated in peacefulness. So that's interesting in itself. Even though more countries became more peaceful, the countries that became less peaceful did so by a greater extent to result in that a gross deterioration in peacefulness. The improvements were driven by improvements in ongoing conflict, improvements in internal conflict, and reduction in the impact of terrorism. And certainly that impact of terrorism, reduction in impact of terrorism has been a global trend since we came off that ISIS-induced peak in 2014. Deteriorations for 2021 were driven by increases or changes in militarisation, and particularly MILEX, which is interesting because the trend has been down for military expenditure for quite a period of time. But in 2021, that reversed and went the other direction. And the safety and security indicators also declined in 2021. So, looking at highlights from the 2021 Global Peace Index, the indicators with the largest deterioration were violent demonstrations. We saw this has been a large increase over the last 12 months, and it's probably not surprising when, as you know, as global watchers and watching the demonstrations that have unfolded as a result of Capitol Hill, Black Lives Matter, so anti-vaxxer, anti-COVID lockdown demonstrations have certainly been very much front of mind and in the press for the last 12 months. Political instability has also, we've seen that have an impact on the indicators over the last 12 months. And as I've already mentioned, militarisation. Indicators with the largest improvements, deaths from internal conflicts, which clearly that is a positive. The number and intensity of internal conflicts has also improved, and deaths by terrorism, as I've mentioned, there's been a trend since 2014 for the impact of terrorism to improve. Okay, top 10 most peaceful countries. And there they are. Iceland is the most peaceful country on the globe, followed by New Zealand, Denmark, Portugal, Slovenia, Austria, Switzerland, Ireland, Czech Republic, and Canada. So it's interesting when you try and think, what is the trend in those most peaceful countries? Clearly, there is a large number of European countries that feature highly in the Global Peace Index. Many of the countries are democracies, but not all. Many of them are cold climate countries. Not that that's an indicator that has an impact on the Global Peace Index, but it's interesting that cold climate countries feature highly, as do smaller island state countries feature highly in the Global Peace Index. Least peaceful countries. Top 10 least peaceful countries, you can see them there. Afghanistan, least peaceful country on the globe, a position it's held for a number of years, unfortunately, followed by Yemen, Syria, South Sudan, Iraq, Somalia, DRC, Libya, Central African Republic, and Russia. If you're looking at just some highlights from regional overviews, North America recorded the largest deterioration in the 2021 Global Peace Index. And this has been an interesting trend, probably unsurprising when you sort of look at the polarisation and political instability, growth of political instability we've seen in North America. So certainly in that period, North America had the largest decline. The regions that had improvements, Europe, and Europe is and remains the most peaceful region on the globe. MENA region also improved, as did South Asia. I know many of you are sitting in South Asia as we speak. COVID-19 and peace. I thought I would just touch on this briefly. I should say that all of our reports, the Global Peace Index, there's a specific report that we've done, or some specific research on the impact of COVID on peace. All of our reports are freely available on our website, Vision of Humanity, and I really encourage you to go to that website if you want to access these reports or dig deeper into some of our resources. COVID has had an interesting impact on peace, and you probably don't need our reports. You probably know it, that COVID has had a significant negative impact on peacefulness across a wide range of indicators. Certainly in the early days in COVID, we saw a reduction in violence, and that was predominantly due to reduction in street violence, but that has turned around and returned to pre-COVID levels. Civil unrest also decreased significantly. I should say, with just going back to violence and the indicators on violence, it's interesting the shift in the violence indicators also, with that shift from prevalence of violence in public places to an increase in violence in private places, and predominantly led by domestic violence or family violence. So civil unrest also had a drop early days with COVID, and then has had a significant increase. And there's some 5,000 COVID-related violent incidents in 2020. And if you want to dig a little bit deeper on that, I encourage you to go to our report. Decreasing political instability as a result of, or increasing political instability as a result of, it's been exacerbated by COVID. And it really is unknown what is the long-term impacts of the pandemic on indicators such as homicide, violent crime. Certainly we're seeing an uptick in suicides early in the piece, and that's potentially a trend that will continue. And in less resilient economies, certainly, less resilient countries, particularly countries that are economically less resilient, we can see there'll be a future increase in civil unrest. This is that mud map that I showed you earlier before, but what this is showing is where we're seeing those COVID-related violent incidents across the globe. Once again, the darker colours indicating the high incidence of pandemic-related violent incidents. You'll see that some countries are grey in colour, and they're the countries where the data is not available. Okay, so we really have tried to get a sense of which of the countries are the better positioned to recover from COVID. We really linked this to our positive peace work. I won't go through all the dot points there, but what I will say is that the positive peace is an indicator of a country's resilience. So countries with higher positive peace, and remembering that definition that I spoke of in the first place, countries with higher positive peace certainly fare better economically, have better, perform better across a range of indicators of well-being, and also a range of ecological indicators as well. So certainly we can see that countries that are higher in positive peace, therefore more resilient, and particularly countries that are resilient and had sound economic preconditions prior to COVID, are faring better in their COVID recovery, as you'd expect. Okay, I'll touch on the trends in the global peacefulness, remembering that this Global Peace Index has been happening for some 15 years. And then we'll stop for a bit and see if there's some questions and have some discussion. So, looking at peace, and this is once again based on the Global Peace Index, which is using that negative definition of peace. And just coming back to that, that negative definition of peace, a way to think of that is it really is counting the broken bits, if you like. It's counting the things that you don't want. So, as the name suggests, it's an aggregate of negative indicators. So, since 2008, peacefulness has declined globally by 2%. And that's driven by 75 countries that have become less peaceful and 86 countries that have become more peaceful. As I indicated before with the yearly data, there are more countries that have become more peaceful. Those countries that have become less peaceful have done by a greater rate, and it's driven global peacefulness down by 2% since 2008. This is the same finding, we just demonstrated a different way. You can see that trend line going up. I should say that IEP charts tend to be counterintuitive. A higher number means that the country is less peaceful. Higher number means that the globe is less peaceful. So that trend line heading up is a negative indicator of declining peacefulness since 2008. And you can see in that bar chart below, since 2008, we've only had 3 years where peacefulness has improved. So, looking at those 3 domains, remember I share with you that the Global Peace Index is based on those 3 domains of ongoing conflict, safety and security, and militarisation. So this helps give you a deeper understanding of what is happening globally with peacefulness. You can see conflict has continued to rise. Remember, going up is a negative indicator. Safety and security, those internal indicators, it's increased somewhat, but has remained relatively stable. And what has improved has been militarisation, except in the last 12 months. We can see, as I mentioned before, that uptick in militarisation over the last 12 months. And I really want to highlight this particular graph because it is concerning. And I've already shared with you some data that demonstrates, yeah, we've become less peaceful, but a large number of countries have become more peaceful. And what this graph indicates is that rising inequity in peacefulness. You can see the least peaceful countries continue to become less peaceful at a higher rate than the most peaceful countries continuing to grow in peacefulness. So you can see this, it's a bit like that saying, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. You can see this in peacefulness. The countries that are high in the Global Peace Index are highly resilient and continue to grow in peacefulness, and the least peaceful countries are trapped in this violence trap, this vicious cycle, which continues to drive them downwards, which is very concerning as global watchers and people concerned with social change. I might just stop there for a minute before I launch into to this and open it for any questions or observations that people would like. Anyone got some questions or something burning that they'd like to chat about? And maybe I can start the conversation by asking you a question. I understand Bazed sent me a class list before, and I understand that many of you are from India. So where do you think India is positioned in the Global Peace Index? Remembering that number 1 is the most peaceful country, 163 is the least peaceful country on the globe, and all the 163 countries are ranked in between. So India, anyone know, or anyone like to have a guess at where India's positioned on the Global Peace Index?
Pragya wants to speak. Pragya?
Yeah, I just had a small question that about the graph where you mentioned that, conflict has decreased, but militarization has increased. So, I mean, if usually we see that, if there is some kind of conflict, especially international conflict or an internal conflict, then we see militarization as kind of a way to bulk up and kind of, warn your so-called enemy state. But then how come when conflict has actually decreased that the militarization has increased? Is there any reason, or is it random?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, and it's actually the other way around. So militarization has decreased. So a number of indicators for militarization have decreased over the last decade. So particularly military expenditure has decreased. Number of military personnel, which is that standardised data, number of military people per 100,000, that has decreased. We've seen a decrease in heavy weapons, not nuclear weapons, unfortunately. And I should say right up front that any country that has a nuclear arsenal is dealt harshly with that particular indicator, as you would expect. India being one of those countries. I can see that you've guessed at 130s for India. That's not too bad, getting close, but I'll encourage some other guesses. So I think your question was that connection between conflict and militarization. Certainly, the relationship between those indicators is somewhat tenuous, because when you think of militarization, why is it that the countries invest in their military? We like to think of militarization as an indicator of perception of fear, if you like, because you invest in a military because you have fear, either, first of all, having fear of other countries having an interest in your territory, or you have designs to increase your territory. Predominantly, that's why. And I should say from the outset that IEP is not anti-military. So the Global Peace Index isn't designed as a negative against military. In fact, it seems that there is a sweet spot of militarization that balances well in some of the higher-ranking countries. Their military expenditure sits around that 2 to 3% of GDP. So there's we don't suggest for one moment that we're anti-military, but certainly if large amounts of resources being pushed towards military at the expense of more peaceful pursuits, education, health, law and order, then there's a problem. As I said, that sweet spot seems to be around 2 to 3%. In some countries, we see that military expenditure is as high as 40, 45% of their national GDP. Clearly, that's not sustainable. So 136, getting closer. It's heading in the right direction. And also see there's a question there. Is it possible that this is the amount spent on militarization that's openly declared by a country? Yeah, so it's a good question, and it goes to that question of data integrity. We rely, we don't produce our own data sets. What we do is aggregate data sets. And what we do is rely on data sets that are reliable and reputable, well researched, and continue to improve. Is it possible that there is inaccuracies? Yes, of course there is. We do our best to standardise data. We do our best to look for proxy indicators to get a sense if there's some data inaccuracies and make appropriate allowances. That's work that's certainly led by our international panel of experts. So India, I should say, sits at 144 on the Global Peace Index. So it is not well placed on the Global Peace Index. Some of the major indicators that draw India down in the Global Peace Index is nuclear and heavy weapons. It's probably no surprise there. It doesn't fare well from an impact of terrorism perspective. Internal conflicts also has an impact on India's position in the Global Peace Index. Is there any other countries that people have a specific interest in? I did look at the list. I think we have someone, a delegate from Afghanistan. As I've already mentioned, Afghanistan sits on the bottom of the index at 163, and I'm sure with recent events we can't see that turning around in the near future.
Charles, Mayu from Afghanistan has raised a hand. I think he wants to say something. Mayu, please go ahead.
Hello, sir. First of all, I would like to thank you for the lecture. Unfortunately, I saw that Afghanistan has the worst rank, getting the okay, what happened? So I would like to ask a question that you mentioned about the Global Peace Index and higher ranking countries being peaceful. But as we have noticed, people mostly in Europe, which is known for the peace and peaceful environment, people in there, they use hypnotic and sedative drugs. Most of the people commit suicide. Is this the result of violence or something other? But if we see these things in Afghanistan, people suffer here a lot from war perspective, but they never commit suicide. If you see the rates, it might be less than 0.1% or something like that. On the other hand, in here there is so few hypnotics that they psychopath patients.
Yep.
So is it as a result of violence or something else?
Yeah. So yeah, I think which is in answer to your question, certainly it is a composite index, and part of that reason for it drawing in as many indicators as possible is to try to develop an index across those three domains that crosses context. It's really interesting. A question I'm often asked is, well, where does America sit on the Global Peace Index? And the answer is 126. So America, which is a very well-resourced country, sits very lowly in the Global Peace Index. Often people jump to the conclusion that's because of militarisation, and which is interesting. I hope this is helping to answer your question, because it shows that perceptions and the reality of the data is not always the same. But the indicator that draws America down the most is its incarceration rate. So it is the country that has the highest incarceration rate, and it incarcerates its people at an alarming rate. And that's the indicator that there's a number of indicators that draws America down, but that incarceration rate is the highest rate globally. So that's standardised incarceration of its citizens per 100,000 people. The other indicator that draws America down, which is not unsurprising, is access to small arms. So the number of small arms per homes in America is at 91 firearms per 100 households. That doesn't suggest one minute that 91 households of 100 have small arms. But what it says is there's some very large personal arsenals in America. I think we know that intuitively, or know that from being global watchers, but it's certainly one of the indicators that draws America down. So I hope that helps to answer the question. I can see somebody's asked a question around Nigeria. Nigeria sits at 136 on the Global Peace Index. So Andrew, I think, suggested that Nigeria sits at 150. So Nigeria sits at 136. Any more questions before I push on? Yeah, so Ravi has made an observation of AUKUS and the proliferation of nuclear submarines. Obviously, that's something that's of a great deal of interest to me, sitting in Australia. I guess I think of it, and thank you for the question, think of it from a Global Peace Index perspective. Clearly the cost of those submarines is going to drive up the percentage of GDP that Australia, my home country, spends on militarisation, which will have a negative impact on Australia's position in the Global Peace Index. Australia is a largely highly peaceful country. We sit at 16, but that is on the decline. And military expenditure is one of the indicators that is impacting there. And another indicator, not unlike America, is incarceration. Andrew, I can see you have your hand up there.
Yes, I want to ask a question. Something has been running through my mind, looking at looking at general definition of peace, where I just feel definition of peace is somehow streamlined to humans, to be precise, because mostly we talk about humans, and looking at the ecosystem and the harm we do to the ecosystem. I feel there should be some sort of remodification or some consideration to other animals or living things on the planet. I stand to be corrected, but I feel, I don't know what you have to say about this, but I feel there is need to a kind of look at the way the definition of peace is, because it is strictly streamlined to humans only, while we share the planet with other animals and the rest. So what do you have to say about this? I don't know if I am it is audible.
Yep. No, I got that, Andrew, and thank you for the question. It's certainly a worthy question. I just note that we've been talking about the Global Peace Index, which focuses on negative peace, that negative definition of peace, and the things that we don't want to see. It's interesting that things that we don't want to see are human creations. So I think I'm going to shift on very shortly and talk about the Positive Peace Index. And positive peace really is more aligned with that systems thinking and humans operating in a larger system the one that you have just eloquently outlined, being the ecosystem. And I think, if this is an area of interest for you, we just last week, and I'm not going to touch on it tonight, but I will mention it, we just released our second edition of our ecological threat report, and it draws on the very point that you're making, drawing that distinction about how we react in the ecosystem, the impact we have on the ecosystem, and how that is creating ecological threats or heightening ecological threats. And we've developed a report on just that issue. So I think you'd find that very interesting. Andrew, thank you for the question. What I might do is, we've been going for just on an hour. Bazad, do you want to take a break for 5 minutes? Just give people an opportunity to stretch their legs and refresh their drinks, and then we'll come back and then talk about. I'll touch very quickly on the economic value of peace and then dive into positive peace. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Great.
I'll make it. I'll make it 9:35 p.m. So we'll just break for 5 minutes. I'll see you back in 5 minutes.
Sure. Yeah. Hello, welcome back. All of you, please turn on your cameras again and keep it switched on throughout the session.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I shall share my screen again. And actually, before I do, I want to chat really quickly about the economic value of peace. But my question to you is: does anybody have a sense of the economic impact of violence? If you're going to put a price on violence globally, annually, does anybody have a sense of what that number would look like? So if we're going to aggregate the impact of violence, turn it into an economic cost, what do you think that would be? Would it be millions? Would it be billions? Would it be a bigger number? What would that cost be? What I'll do is share screen again. And answer that question. So the economic impact of violence for 2020, as reported in the 2021 Global Peace Index, was $14.96 trillion. And that is about what it has been over the last. It's trended upwards somewhat, but annually we're spending some $14 trillion a year as a result of the impact of violence. Now that's a very, very large number. It's equivalent to 11.6% of the global GDP. Or if you want to put it in another way to make it more real, it is nearly $2,000 US dollars for every person that's on the globe, which in my mind that is a tragic number. When you think that nearly a third of the globe's population earn less than $1 a day in US terms. It's a phenomenal number to think that for every person on the globe we're spending nearly $2,000 as a result of the impact of violence. To think of that another way, if you could actually, if we could just save 10% of that figure, that would be a saving of $1.4 trillion annually. To put that into the figure, back to that figure of $2,000 per person, if we could save 10%, that would be $200 for every person on the globe that we would save annually if we could shave 10% off that figure. $200 annually, that would probably help fund a global reasonable education system, help fund a global health system, and probably still have some change. And there is some data on what it would cost per head to have a reasonable health and education cover globally. And I can assure you that 10% reduction would cover that off very nicely with change. Just to break that down a little bit more, I won't spend too long on this. Unsurprisingly, a big lump of that expenditure, 42.9%, is on military expenditure. The next second biggest lump of that money is internal security expenditure. So that's, cops, prisons, other internal security forces is the second big lump of money. You can see it going down from there. Okay, that's the same data. It's just broken up into regions. It's just giving you a sense of how the regions are, the impact of violence in the different regions globally is broken up. And you can certainly see there with South Asia, 45% on military expenditure when you look at the cost of violence, 41% on the 41% on the internal security, and the spirals down from there. Okay, this is where I want to get to is positive peace. Remembering those two definitions that I shared with you at the start, that negative peace definition being the absence of violence or absence of fear of violence, looking at what are the broken bits in communities or in countries, and that's what the Global Peace Index is formed on. The Positive Peace Report is formed on this positive definition of peace being the attitudes, institutions and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. So what we did, because we, from the Global Peace Index, we know which are the most peaceful countries on the globe. We looked and studied the most peaceful countries on the globe, looked at some 20,000 different data sets to see what correlated most strongly across those most peaceful countries to build an empirical, data-driven understanding of what is happening in the most peaceful countries, the peaceful communities, to contribute to peace. So the strength of this approach is it takes out guess and opinion and emotion. It's just by looking at the data sets and understanding what correlates most highly. So from that approach, we've built the Positive Peace Report. It's in its 7th year. It ranks the same 163 countries. It uses 24 indicators. Once again, we develop it, but it's formed by a panel of experts. And what we've been able to derive from the 24 indicators that we developed, we're able to bucket them into these 8 pillars of positive peace. And there's 3 indicators that inform each of these pillars of positive peace. And what we'll also touch on tonight briefly is what we understand around these pillars of positive peace is that they work together as a system. So this is systems thinking, a systems approach, and a system of understanding about how social systems work and remain strong. So, and those pillars are well-functioning government, equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, good relations with neighbours, high levels of human capital, acceptance of the rights of others, low levels of corruption, sound business environment. There's probably no surprises in those pillars. When you sort of think about it, you know intuitively that these are things that you need to be happening in communities and in countries for them to be working soundly and peacefully. But what our research does is demonstrates that empirically. So there's a number of things that we know about positive peace, and I mentioned some of these before. We know that countries with high levels of positive peace have higher per capita income, so that they perform better across a range of economic indicators. They're more resilient. That means that they're better prepared, better able to respond, and better able to recover from shocks, whether those shocks are exogenous or it's interesting because we're at this point in time we're facing one of the most significant global shocks that we've seen in a significant period of time. So this is really relevant at this point in time. High positive peace countries perform better across a range of environmental indicators and perform better across a number of measures of well-being. I noticed that somebody asked a question around the happiness index, and really the happiness index, not unlike our index, is an aggregate of indicators that are aligned with happiness. So it's a similar approach, but with a different outcome in mind. It's probably unsurprising if you look at the happiness index, quite a number of the countries that perform well in the happiness index also perform well in the positive peace report. Higher positive peace countries also are performing better on against development goals, particularly the Sustainable Development Goals. Higher positive peace countries perform better with the Millennial Development Goals and are performing better with the SDGs as well. This slide is just bearing out that point I made before, that each pillar we've identified the indicators that correlate most heavily, and you can see there the three indicators that we use to inform that pillar of well-functioning government: so the political democracy index, government effectiveness index, and the rule of law estimate. This is what the globe looks like. You've seen a couple of these mud maps already. The darker blue, the more highly positive peace countries, and the lighter blue being the less peaceful countries based on positive peace index. But the strength of this index is it, in my work, I'm a practitioner, I'm not a researcher, and my work is really about applying this positive peace index, whether that's in a strategic sense or in a community sense. So yes, the data that we collect and the report that we produce is that meta level or the high level data, country level data, but the same approach, that same system is relevant at community level. And for those of you who work at community level, I think you'll find that the positive peace approach to peace building is an interesting approach in that it doesn't focus on the conflict. What it focuses on is how to strengthen the pillars. So it's a strengths-based approach, which is also a self-determined approach. So if we're applying positive peace within a community, it's really about how to engage the community actors in understanding the social system, building an understanding of their social system through that pillars lens, and identifying opportunities to build strengths in particular pillars to strengthen their social system. So the Positive Peace Report, what it reveals over the last 10 years, the globe has become more peaceful. Remembering that looking at the Global Peace Index, it has become less peaceful, but positive peace has improved by 3.3%. So a way to think about this, remembering that that positive peace is measuring what is broken. A way to think, sorry, negative peace is looking at what's broken. But a way to think about positive peace is a country's potential, or in this case, because it's global data, the globe's potential to be more peaceful than what it actually is. So it really is talking to the potential. So we've seen the pillars that we've seen improvements in over this period of time is free flow of information, sound business environment, and equitable distribution of resources. Where we've seen deteriorations has been in the attitudes domain, and I'll talk a little bit about that because that is significant. We've also seen deteriorations in lower levels of corruption and well-functioning government pillars. And here's the pillars, those 8 pillars, looking at the percentage change since 2009 for the pillars. And you can see that the pillar that has fared the best over this period of time is free flow of information. And that's pretty understandable when you think of the proliferation of mobile phones and the spread of the internet. Certainly this is a pillar that has strengthened, followed by sound business environment. And you see it can ranging down from there. And the 2 pillars that have decreased being well-functioning government and low levels of corruption. And this is significant because a shift in a government from functioning to not functioning can topple a whole social system, particularly if the system is fragile. So it can only need one pillar to fall over and the system can fall over. I can demonstrate that for you as well. Looking at it from a regional perspective, these are the improvements and deteriorations. You can see that all of the regions have improved in positive peace, with the exception of North America. North America, it's 2 countries, Canada and USA. So it certainly, once again, it's probably something that we know from being global watchers, but what this data does is demonstrates it empirically. And you can see there that South Asia and Asia Pacific have been improvers over the period of time. If you're going to break that down into individual indicators, and remembering there's 3 indicators for each pillar, you can see, as I mentioned before, free flow of information, that proliferation of the use of the internet has increased. And sort of wages down, you can see some of the life expectancy has improved over the 10-year period. Some of the indicators that have decreased, quality of information, we certainly we're aware of the impact of disinformation or misinformation or fake news, as the term is often used now, has had globally, particularly on attitudes. And that sort of comes through in that other pillar that hasn't, or other indicator that hasn't fared well, that hostility to foreigners and private property. So, as I said, each pillar, and this pillar we're looking at here is acceptance of rights of others, has 3 indicators. With this particular pillar, it relies on 3 indicators: gender inequality index, group grievance index, and inclusion by socioeconomic group. And each of the indicators contributes to one of those 3 domains, coming back to that definition of positive peace being the attitudes, institutions and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies or peaceful communities. And that's where I want to touch on quickly, because I think this is an important slide. As I said before, the positive peace, and it's a little bit hard to read this slide. The legend is not as clear. But overall, positive peace has improved. Remember, the line going downwards is an improvement, smaller number is improvement. You can see that line there that I'm hovering over. That's the overall score for positive peace. And you can see that improvement that I talked to before. So what has driven that change has, oops, sorry, my apologies, has been this significant impact in structures, so the structures domain. You can see that the institutions domain has it's gone off a little bit, but it remains steady. What has decreased and held back positive peace from a better improvement is this attitudes domain. And when you think about it, you sort of think about the global environment, you know, the rise in ultranationalism, certainly polarised views within countries. You can understand how this attitudes domain, which is made up of a number of indicators, has dropped away. So, you know, as people working in peace building, social change, development, you know, this is very concerning. This global trend. Benefits of positive peace. I've sort of touched on these to a certain extent, but we know that higher positive peace countries are more resilient. And as I said before, resilience, a way to define resilience is countries or communities that are better prepared for shocks, better able to respond to shocks, and better able to recover from shocks. They have better environmental outcomes, high measures of well-being, and higher per capita income, and perform better against development goals. Here's a really quick case study, and it's a really relevant and recent one, looking at Afghanistan. Now, what has occurred in Afghanistan is that drop away in well-functioning government. So we see effectively one pillar falling over in a short period of time, and it having a significant, drastic impact on positive peace in Afghanistan. Then, you know, you can, and we have gone through the process. If you're interested in this particular case study, from 3 or 4 weeks ago, we produced a report on Afghanistan, and it dives a bit deeper into this particular case study and the impact on the changes in Afghanistan. But what it demonstrates is one pillar dropping away, a well-functioning government dropping away, and the impact it's had across the whole social system. Okay, and this is sort of just bearing out that same peace study, that same case study. Once again, the COVID and Peace report that I mentioned before, it really draws out how countries with higher positive peace have been better able to cope with the shock of COVID-19. I want to leave a bit of time for us for discussion, so I'm just sort of shifting through some of these slides. But this slide demonstrates that point very well. This is looking at COVID fatalities as a percentage of cases. You can see that the very high positive peace countries had lower fatality rates. Low positive peace countries have had higher fatality rates as a result of COVID. Just drawing out on that issue of resilience, and I think this is a very interesting slide. So what this data is looking at natural disasters, and it's the slide on the right is a physical count of the number of natural disasters broken into countries that are high in positive peace, very high in positive peace, medium in positive peace, and low in positive peace. You can see that the actual number of natural disasters experienced across the range of countries isn't that different. There's a bit of variance leaning towards the lower and medium positive peace countries having a higher number of natural disasters, but the numbers aren't that different. The range is what, about 500 to 700, I think. But when you look at the fatality rate for the same number of disasters, the very high and high positive peace countries have far lower fatality rates for the same, roughly the same number of natural disasters. It really bears out that point of positive peace being an indicator of country or community resilience, and that ability to be prepared respond and recover from shocks, particularly natural disasters. So what I mentioned this before, what underpins positive peace is that systems thinking. We know that those 8 pillars work together as a system, and really our approach in operationalising a positive peace, whether that's at strategy level or at community level, is to build an understanding of that system and building an understanding of how we can strengthen that social system. Now, it's very different to that sort of cause and effect thinking. Technocratic peace building or traditional peace building, and my discipline is peace building. That's my background. It's very much okay. Let's start with the conflict analysis. What can we do as an intervention? Positive peace approach is about how do we strengthen the system with a view to try and move that system out of a vicious cycle and into a virtuous cycle. A system is a set of parts that interact within a context to and achieve a goal. We know that systems are complex. There's less understood about systems than there is understood. It's a different way of thinking. Many of us have been educated and brought up to think of cause and effect. Let's study this cause and what is the effect. So that's sort of very much linear thinking. Systems thinking requires a different approach and a shift away from that sort of cause and effect thinking. And it acknowledges that systems have encoded norms. Probably a way to think about this is to think of the social systems, and I invite you to do that right now, is to think about a social system that you're involved in. We're all involved in many social systems. Our family is a social system. Our immediate neighbourhood is a social system. Our community is a social system. We're involved in a range of different communities that may not necessarily be about geography. You could belong to a sporting club. Your school, your university is a social system. Your workplace is a social system. So I encourage you to think about those social systems, and encourage you to think that each of those social systems has some encoded norms. My family has its things that it likes to do, celebrations that are very much part of what my family does. We align to certain ways of thinking. So we have those encoded norms, and the system likes to return to those encoded norms, that balance, that equilibrium, that homeostasis, if you like to bring it into a biological term. So we're all involved in multiple social systems. Those social systems have encoded norms. Those social systems are usually defined by some boundaries, if you like. If you belong to a soccer club or a sporting club, the boundaries are the people who play and the people who are involved in supporting the club. And so it's a neat way to think about social systems. And another level of thinking is to think about when you have tried to influence a social system that you're involved in. It could be that you've tried to change your family, and what an observation. If we had time, I'd go through the exercise of us sharing some reflections. But often what we see that when you try and stop something and start something in a social system, that it often fails. If you try and shift something incrementally over a period of time, try to nudge the system so you slowly change those encoded norms, then there's greater chance of success. So it's the same thinking when you shift that up to a societal system, whether it's at community level or at nation level. that sort of stop-start process isn't necessarily successful, but thinking about how you can incrementally shift and nudge a system to become more peaceful by strengthening those pillars is what positive peace approach is about. And sort of bearing out that point, we know and we can demonstrate through our research that social systems, communities, countries, if they're shifted, whether in a positive path or a negative path, can hit a tipping point. And that tipping point can shift the social system or the country into a virtuous cycle, so it becomes more peaceful, or counterwise, it can tip it into a negative cycle, so it tips into a vicious cycle and can spiral into that violence trap. How are we going? Not too well. All right. So I've covered a lot of ground. I probably might hold up on the slides. Really, the rest of these slides, I'm happy to share this pack if people are interested in the pack. But what this pack is trying to bear out is that the remainder of this pack is that idea of systems thinking and using those 8 pillars as a way to think about nudging social systems. And this slide is interesting because when you sort of think of coming back to the COVID environment, our encoded norms have shifted quite quickly. Now we see that what this graph is demonstrating is that pre-COVID, the number of countries that had rules or regulations or recommendations around mask wearing. The grey countries didn't. The coloured country, one, did. In a very short period of time, the global system has shifted. And this is what the globe looks like for countries that have a new encoded norm around mask wearing. So the social system has shifted and shifted quite quickly in response to changed stimuli or changed inputs to the system. Okay, so I'll share a couple more slides, which is really just bearing this out in a community example, and then leave the last bit of time for discussion. So as I said, the work that I'm involved in is about using that positive peace framework and activating that positive peace framework at either strategy level or at community levels. This is an example of a peace builder who attended one of our positive peace workshops in Uganda, a gentleman by the name of Jude Kakuba, and he was a Rotarian, and we have a partnership with Rotary, and Rotary quite adopted positive peace as their peace building approach. And Jude was a teacher, and he worked in a school that had poor attendance outcomes and poor academic outcomes. So he had tried a number of different approaches, and after attending the Positive Peace workshop, he decided to apply positive peace thinking as his approach to trying to shift the social system, his school systems get better academic results. So he thought through the positive peace pillars and looked to strengthen the system using that pillar framework. So higher levels of human capital, he undertook doing a school rebuilding process, and he had some access to some funds, and it was fairly modest funding through Rotary. So they did a rebuilding program, refurbishment program of the school, and what he did was used local folk and was able to increase the skills of the local folk, but also keep the resource within the community. Low levels of corruption. They looked for a labelling system and a monitoring system of the school resources, creating a particular committee within the school committee, so there was responsibility and ownership of the school resources. Equitable distribution of resources. This was interesting. As I said, the school had low attendance rates, low academic outcomes. This is probably the one pillar that he that had the greatest influence. Another negative prior to this intervention was many of the students would come to school hungry, therefore had difficulty focusing on the schoolwork, but also during breaks would raid the nearby orchards to steal fruit, which didn't have a good outcome with the neighbours, who were quite upset with the fruit being stolen. So what they did was introduced a feeding program, a porridge program at school. Really cheap food, just a couple of cents per student per day to feed them some maize porridge. Had a number of effects. It stopped the stealing of the fruit. They also did a fruit tree planting program around the school, and also encouraged parents to send the children to school, because parents would know that they'd children get a meal, and also meant that they were more engaged during the school time and better able to learn. Acceptance of the rights of others. One of the factors that was impacting on attendance was women going through their monthly cycles. So he implemented a feminine hygiene products program that reduced absenteeism amongst young women. Free flow of information. They really wanted the community to have ownership of their school programs, so they used local community radio and engaged local parents in the school management and the school governance, so there was greater ownership of the school program. And you can see there that they were very successful in improving their attendance rates, but also not only improving their attendance rates, but also improving their academic outcomes. So it's a really short and sharp example at community level of the application of positive peace to strengthen a social system to get an outcome. So that positive peace approach is being adopted across a range of social endeavours. We get involved in quite a bit of work with preventing violent extremism, so PVE projects, social inclusion projects. We get involved in a range of economic development projects. So it really is any project where you want to shift that social system, that positive peace approach is a really neat lens to approach the social change through a strengths-based approach. Okay, I'm going to finish there. There's a couple of pictures from Jude Kakuba's project. So if you're interested in discovering more around the Institute for Economics and Peace, to our work or getting engaged in positive peace, there's a range of opportunities that the Institute for Economics and Peace offers. First of all, we have online Positive Peace Academy, and so it really is to build an understanding of positive peace. It's a light touch. It's online. It's freely available. Anyone can join. Our Ambassadors program, which is for people who want to get a deeper understanding of our research and the application of our research. We've got some 3,000 ambassadors across about 106 different countries. Once again, anyone can express interest in the program, and it's a free program that we offer. Positive Peace Workshops, I've mentioned, that's the approach that we predominantly use to take the research and operationalise it out into communities or into strategy groups. How am I going? We've got a little bit of time left, so I'll stop sharing the screen and open up for questions.
Arotra, you want to ask a question? See, you've raised your hand.
So thank you for the presentation. I also had a possibility of working in some of the West African countries. I was in Ivory Coast, I was in Niger, Benin, and Togo. With my few experiences over there, there is a constant observation as if the developed countries do not want a peaceful atmospheres in the undeveloped countries. In a way, they encourage people to create violence, to create problems in the undeveloped countries. So what would be your opinion? How would you see such kind of understanding of the developed countries?
I think your question was, do we see from our data that violence is encouraged in underdeveloped countries by developed countries? Certainly, we don't see that in our data. I would say, however, if you're looking at what strikes me is that some of, this could be a very long conversation. If you look back to colonialism, I guess the rot really starts there. I would suggest, and my country, Australia, is no different, which was colonised by the English, and the Aboriginal people, the original country of this people, dispossessed of their country, and they've never ceded sovereignty. And I would suggest it is similar across many countries that have been colonised, including West African countries. And I'm sure that there is unsound business, to use the opposite of sound business environment, that proffer well out of conflict and proffer well by being able to profit from resources in poorly governed countries, particularly where there's poor government systems and high levels of corruption. So, in answer to your question, are there individuals, are there organisations, are there corrupt officials that look for violence to continue for their own benefit? Of course there is. As global watchers, I think undoubtedly that's the case. I wouldn't buy into, and we're very cautious at IEP to not talk outside of our research, and this is outside of the realm of our research. So I can't state from our research that there are nation states that openly, or to my knowledge, that proffer the continuance of violence for the sake of greed and profit. But I would be a fool to suggest that doesn't happen. I think there was a fair bit of fence sitting there, but I'm very conscious to stay within the realm of our research. But thank you for your question. And it is part of the world that we're quite active in. Nigeria is the country that has our largest number of IEP ambassadors. We're seeing a proliferation of positive peace, grassroots positive peace projects proliferate in Nigeria, which is really encouraging. And other parts of West Africa, we're starting to get some cut through with positive peace. We've started we now have an office in Zimbabwe, which is clearly in Southern Africa, but we see that Nigeria will be on the African continent, be our next office. Well, we've just recently taken on a IEP fellow in Ethiopia, given the current outbreak of conflict in Ethiopia.
I think Zishan wants to ask a question. Zishan.
Hello, so thank you for the lecture. I actually wanted to know, like, you define positive peace as that it is related to the attitude, institution, and structure that create and sustain a peaceful society, then are we really considering the attitude of the citizens of a nation, or are we actually focusing on the attitude of the governance or the system?
Thank you for the question, Sishan. You broke up a little bit, but I think your question was around the attitudes domain. So there are a number of pillars of positive peace that contribute to the attitudes domain: acceptance of the rights of others, good relations with neighbours, and the free flow of information. There are a number of pillars, those 8 pillars, that contribute to that attitudes domain. And within those pillars, there are multiple indicators that also contribute to the attitudes domain. Some of those indicators are purely quantitative counts. Others are a result of qualitative data sets from surveys and a range of different instruments. So in answer to your question, both is the answer to the question. It captures some governmental indicators as well as some individual indicators. I should say, and I should have mentioned it before, that in all our reports are freely available online, and all the reports dive deep into the methodology. So if you're keen to look at the methodology for the reports, it's all there. It's all available, including you can dive deeper on that particular question. You can identify the specific indicators that contribute to that attitudes domain. What are the data sources for that attitudes domain, and what is it that feeds those data sources, whether it's a survey instrument or specific count. Thank you for the question.
And there's a question in the chat box too from Ravi.
Thank you for the question, Ravi. And I don't disagree with the concept of the question. We certainly see, and we're very conscious with our language in the Positive Peace report, that the language is crosses cultures and crosses regions. I think a good example of that is we're very deliberate about using the language acceptance of the rights of others. I just highlight that as an example because we don't say acceptance of human rights, because the Charter of Human Rights is not actually universally globally accepted. So we're very conscious that rights and that perception of rights varies from context to context, which is with our approach to positive peace building. I don't want to be the one standing before a community talking about positive peace. I want it to be owned by local partners, local NGOs, local CSOs, or local educators who understand the context, speak the language, and can contextualise the positive peace approach. Positive peace approach is always a self-determined approach. So it's about the individuals that are engaging with the process as opposed to the individual facilitating, dictating the outcome on how to strengthen a social system. So I don't disagree that many peace building approaches are laden with values, opinions and viewpoints that favour particular cultures over others. We're very conscious and deliberate in the build of positive peace, that it is can be adapted to the context. Thank you for the question.
We've completed 2 hours, but there's one more question from Noreen. Do we take it? Noreen, please go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for your Okay. Thank you, sir, for the amazing lectures. So I would like to put a little bit highlight about India, because India, as you have said, that it stands on 144 spot of Peace Index, of Global Peace Index. So I want to highlight that India is a country, like it's a melting pot of different cultures and religions, and that is being the one main issues of cultural conflict and regional conflict prevail in our country. So I also I belong to a small state of India in the northeast side, where there is almost 32 tribes with different cultures, different religions are there, and there's so much of cultural conflict, regional conflict going on. So my question is that, sir, is there any so as you have mentioned about these programs like workshops and ambassadors and this academy things. So apart from these steps, so is there any practicable, very easy approach so that as a localite of that area, how can we approach them that this, although we have diverse culture and all, how can we, resolve the conflict we are, pertaining in our society in a very easy and approachable steps? Like, how can we approach that? This is my question, sir.
Sure. I could spend an hour on that question. Thank you for the question. I won't spend an hour. And your point is really well made. The Global Peace Index is a macro level data at country level. It doesn't tell the whole story. And India is a really good example. I've forgotten how many states there are, how many provinces there are in India, but I know there's many, and I know there's a great variance amongst the states. I actually did a number of workshops in India and had some conversations with some officials in India about developing a subnational indice, which is far more powerful. And we've done this for a number of countries. Mexico is an example. So we take that same thinking, that macro level thinking, and bring it down to either province level or to administration level, so local government level, which is much more powerful and usable for the likes of you and I who are working at community level to have a deeper understanding of their community. So I just want to make that point, that it is very hard. Macro level, country level data doesn't tell the full story for us that are operating at community level. For us as IAP, if we're working in a particular community, then we'll look to draw that same thinking and gather data sets at the local level. So we've got a better understanding of province or local government area. In fact, on our website, there are examples of this subnational research. The Mexico Peace Index, there's a UK index. The UK index is a little bit old now, but it brings it down to shire level, so subnational level. There's a US index which brings it down to the states within the US, but also into the metropolitan statistical area. So that means sort of like, the greater New York or greater Chicago area. So having an understanding of the data at a subnational level is helpful. But I make the point that many of our workshops are within communities and people understand their communities. So we use the Positive Peace Framework as an approach to community analysis. So building an understanding of the context by understanding, where is a particular community placed within those pillars. And the strength of that is understanding where is the opportunity to strengthen a particular pillar. So it's a really good starting piece, and answer to your question is to work with local communities to understand where are the strengths and weaknesses across those pillars, and what are the opportunities that are within the capacity of the community or the project to strengthen pillars. Thank you for the question, and I really encourage you to have a look at the resources on our website, Vision of Humanity, which are extensive, and you can really get a deeper understanding of how to apply positive peace at community level. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're most welcome.
All right, so thank you so much. With this, we come to the end of our session today. Thank you so much, Mr. Allen, for joining us and for this very informative presentation. Thank you all. I'll see you tomorrow. And Mr. Allen, I will send you the reflections that students submit for today's session. So they do submit a written reflection after each session. So I'll send you the ones for today's one. So
thank you. And what I will send on will be, I'll send on the slide pack from today's presentation if people want to refer back to that slide pack. And I'll also send a link to some of those resources I mentioned. So the online Positive Peace Academy and the Ambassadors Program. So I'll send on some links you can share them about. Thank you for your time this evening. I've enjoyed chatting. Sorry, I know I tried to plough through a lot of material, but I wanted to give you a bit of an overview of our work. Thank you.